apt. Again, thank you everyone for your patience. I think it is so apt that this program is called The New Normal, Sensing the Changing Patterns in the Post-Pandemic Era. I think this is a perfect example of some of those changing patterns as we deal with technology to try to reach our alumni and constituents around the globe with programming from Emory University, the Goizueta Business School, the Laney Graduate School, and the university and the Office of Alumni and Constituent Engagement. Thank you all so much for being here. My name is Katie Bush. I'm the Executive Director of International Advancement and Constituent Engagement here at Emory, working to bring new programming to our international constituents and engaging with our alumni networks, and specifically hosting tonight a showcase of the work of some of our colleagues who are from Canada and that work in Canada, some of our alums that work in Canada, and of course our Canada network and our volunteer leader, Shakar Jha, who is here with us tonight and who will introduce everyone and kind of take this program going forward. Just wanted to have a few housekeeping updates. This program, as you know, is being recorded. The recording will also be sent out to everybody who registered for this event and will also be posted on our international programs page and our Emory Connects page after the program is concluded. If you have any questions during the program, please put them in the Q&A function. The Q&A function will then be monitored at the end of the program, and we will be answering any of your questions towards the end of the program. Without further ado, I want to turn it over to Shakar Jha, again, our volunteer leader from the Canada Network, and take it away.
Thank you so much, Katie, and thank you everyone for joining. We apologize for a little technical glitch. So, on behalf of Canada Network, I would like to welcome you all to this webinar. Just to introduce myself, my name is Shakar Jha. I am a full-time MBA class of 2016 graduate from the business school. And I co-lead the Canada Network here along with Florin Korkos. So Florin and I basically founded the Canada chapter in the fall of 2017, making it one of the youngest members of our alumni association north of the border. And ever since we founded it, our alumni base has been growing ever since. We have more than 300 alumni who were actively engaged with us through one or the other initiatives and activities that we conduct in association with the Emory Alumni Association. So on behalf of Canada Network, again, welcome everyone. And at that point, switching gear to why we're all here, we recognize that we're all living in unprecedented times where the pandemic COVID-19 has literally disrupted all aspects of our lives, be it personal or professional. One of the biggest aspects that have been disrupted are consumer behavior and consumer confidence. And in our quest to understand how the consumer behavior and the confidence are going to shape up over the few years from now, in the post-pandemic era, we have organized an esteemed panel here who would share their thoughts on how do they look and see the future shaping from now onwards. The panel has together numerous years of experience and expertise in this field. At that point, I would like to introduce to you all the chair and moderator for our panel, Professor Doug Bowman, the McGreevy Term Chair and the Professor of Marketing at the Business School. Professor Bowman is an accomplished researcher specializing in the quantitative aspect of marketing and consumer relationship management. He has numerous award-winning researches and has appearances in TV and business shows as well. He's been associated with the business school for over 20 years now. And if we are all business school alumni, at one point or the other time, we might have taken his product and brand management class. So with that, I want to say we are delighted to have you, Professor Bowman, with us. All over to you.
Great. Thanks a bunch, Shakar, and thanks to you and Florin for the leadership you're showing up there in Canada. You both were stellar students when you were here, so I'm not surprised at the accomplishments that you've done to date. In fact, when I was thinking about Florin the other day, he's probably still the most intellectually sort of inquisitive student I think I've ever taught. So again, kudos to both of you. So what I'm going to do here is partially introduce the other two panelists. And what we're going to do is I'm going to start off with each of them. I'm going to start with the Yanwen first, then I'll go to Pablo. And I'll give a little soundbite about Yanwen, and then I got three things that I want you to to tell me, Yanwen. One is your connection to Canada. Number two is something you did this summer, maybe that you didn't think you were going to be doing, but the current conditions sort of made that a new reality. And then something you thought you were going to do, but didn't happen because of the current sort of conditions. So I'll start off my connection to Canada. So I was born in Winnipeg, grew up in Brampton. I did my undergrad at the University of Waterloo. I have an MBA from Western Ontario. And worked a couple of years at Nortel Networks when they were still the Canada's technology darling, at least at the time. But we all know that sort of changed a little bit after that. Anyway, Yanwen is one of our stellar PhD grads from the Goizueta Business School. She's an absolute rising star in the quantitative aspects of marketing. Her initial position was at Colorado, but then she sort of realized that Canada is really the place to be. And so UBC was smartly sort of grabbed her, and she's been there for, I think it's roughly 3 years. And in that time, she's now the Canada Research Chair in Marketing Analytics. So let me sort of turn it over to Yanwen. Before I do that, you'll notice that her background, those of you that haven't been to campus in about sort of 10, 15 years, that's the Goizueta Business School building. Initially, the horseshoe you see behind her opened up in 1998. And then the extension that's over her left shoulder opened up in 2005. So Yanwen, your Canadian connection, and then a little bit about this summer.
Okay, sure. So, well, thank you for having me here. I'm very proud to be an Emory alumni as well as part of the Canadian network. Okay, so right now I'm a UBC assistant professor. In terms of the thing I thought I would have been doing, of course, during the summertime, it's the best time in British Columbia. I thought I would be travel a lot, around, maybe around different countries, also around different areas in British Columbia, but I end up just in a 2-bedroom box. So this is of course similar to everybody. And what I end up doing, and which I didn't think of, is I got engaged because this is the only way to get my boyfriend here in British Columbia because of the border closure. So that's something I didn't expect, but I suppose it's a good thing for me, mental health wise. Yeah.
Congratulations. I didn't know that. So, and congratulations to your fiance now too. So let me, Pablo, so same idea. So Pablo's a professor in the political science department. He also has a association with, we have a quantitative group in the college that really has in some ways changed a lot of the perspectives that students get when they come here to study. Pablo did his PhD at Northwestern, spent a little bit of time at Chicago, University of Chicago, and then we were able to grab him from there. Absolutely stellar sort of hire for us. He and I, we know each other well from some recruiting events we often do for undergrad admissions. So Pablo, give us, again, a little bit of soundbite, your connection to Canada, and a little bit about the summer.
Yeah, well, I grew up in Canada. I was born and raised in Toronto, lived in Cabbagetown and then Yonge and Bloor, kind of Boys Town for first 18 years of my life. And then I moved to the United States and I've lived here ever since. So about more than half my adult life now, or more than half my life, I've lived in the US. But I'm a Canadian and I mostly study American politics, and that's where a lot of my research is on. But I got the sense that Canadians make the best scholars of America because we have this sort of outsider's view and a critical eye. And as a kid, I was just always fascinated by all the differences, institutional and otherwise, between the countries. So I'm still a Canadian citizen. I'm working on the American, so I'm between both. My wife and kids are all American. Normally in the summer, at the last week in July, we head up to Muskoka to a friend's place, get all the kids together. And unfortunately, that was not in the cards this year. But instead, what have we done? We've heavily invested in bikes. So I'm a bike to work kind of person, and I've just added more and more accessories to my giant cargo bike. And my wife got an electric bike, and we've just been taking the kids because that's it's the easiest way to get out. We've got 2 young ones to throw them on the back of the bike and just go to a new park every weekend and kick the ball around and do things like that. So that's been the summer mostly for us, but it's been great actually. A lot of family time.
Great, super. And so my soundbite from this summer is I broke my leg playing ice hockey. So the interesting thing is that I thought I'd get a lot of sort of pats on the back from my Canadian friends down here, but they had two reactions. One was either, what in the world are you still playing ice hockey when you're over age 50 if your last name isn't Howe? Or number two is, who has ice? Who has ice rinks in the middle of summer? You know, in Canada, you take it out. But anyway, so it's healed now, and I'm looking forward to playing again on Monday. Next thing I thought we would do, because I see both the backgrounds, makes me think about sort of campus and campus life. And so I know, Pablo, you and I are both teaching, you know, this fall. And so would it maybe sort of turn it over to you right away and some thoughts on what it's like to be, or, you know, sort of teaching Emory students in the current situation. Then I'll chime in, and then we'll go to Yanwen.
Yeah, so I've been teaching fully online, and you know, it's for me, it's been kind of an inspiring time. It's an opportunity to really like create some new material. So I teach this large intro to statistical thinking class. That's the major requirement for this new QTM program. And so we get an enormous number of undergrads to the program, and it's kind of their first exposure to working with data. And we try to teach a more kind of creative, critical view. It's not just about memorizing distributions. We're thinking about causal inference. And so I've taken this opportunity to develop a lot of new online apps, basically. So these kind of shiny apps where they can play around with data in a controlled environment with like lesson plans attached. We're doing a lot of breakout sessions, and I'm able to record lectures using a bit more technology, a bit more interactive, showing data working kind of live. And then the live sections are a lot more enjoyable now online because there's no lecturing. It's just me, you know, throwing polls at them, cold calling. We're doing breakout exercises. And one thing I'm worried about is it's really easy to do these online, and you know, I want to bring some of these lessons back to live teaching, and some of these things won't work as well. You know, the breakout sessions that you can do online, for example. So I'm curious to see how the new course translates to the old world when we get back there.
Yeah, that's great. Good insights. So in the business school in the spring, we thought we were going to have a large number of hybrid classes. What ended up happening was sort of mid-July, the university decided freshmen and a small number of upper year students in the undergrad program could be on campus. So all BBA students now are fully online. With our MBA programs, faculty had the option of doing the hybrid or staying with the hybrid or going online. So I do my MBA classes is the hybrid format, and I do my BBA section as a fully online class. The hybrid students, it's been interesting to see how that's played out. So the first year students, I don't teach the core. The first year students classes are getting good attendance. So they're on this A-B rotation so that they are spaced out in the classroom. So basically you get to come into class every second day. I teach an elective. So my elective has 55, 60 students. They created sort of an A-B list, but reality is it's the same 15 or 16 that come in every day. And so most of them are staying online. The classroom itself, in some ways you feel like you're working at a gas station. So there's a big plexiglass shield in front of the podium. You wear a face shield. You're hooked up with a mic, so both the off-campus and on-campus students can hear you. The challenge, if there's been a challenge, it's been the audio, especially when students in the class have their mics on or things like that on their computer. So I think we've finally sort of solved the problem, but it's working. And I think from my perspective, one of the big advantages that I'm seeing now with Zoom is the whole chat function. So it's allowing students to provide an extra example or reference that we wouldn't be able to do on the fly. It's a chance for the students to build a little bit of camaraderie to themselves. And it's worked really well. I've had a couple of guest speaker classes because it allows the guest speakers to then see the menu of questions and sort of pick the ones that are sort of the best to answer. And so we're making much more efficient use of our time. Yanwen, a little bit about sort of UBC. I'm not sure if you're teaching this fall, but some observations, even if you're not.
Mhm. Sure, I am teaching. Like, actually, I just had my first day teaching yesterday. Everything's going on fully online for the UBC Sauder School of Business. And I think one observation I had is students adapt pretty well to the new normal online teaching environment. Maybe because for this generation, like Gen Z, or I think, right, Millennial or Gen Z, they're pretty digital native. So they adapted very quickly. And the other thing I realized is mentally, they're getting more strong. They're less critical and more resilient. So I think I've seen some of the positive changes, like people are realizing all of the challenges, political-wise, like financial-wise, economic-wise. So they're getting more tolerant to each other. So that's definitely something very encouraging at this moment.
Yeah, and Yanwen, are most of your students sort of local to British Columbia, or are you teaching people that are basically located all over the world?
Mm-hmm. At UBC, we have a very large international population. For the undergraduate program, I'd like to say about 40% of our students are from international. That's why I'm teaching right now 2 sessions, the same prep, but 2 different sessions. So one is scheduled in the morning sessions to adapt to the local students. And then the other one that was used to be scheduled in the afternoon was now changed to be in the evening to adapt to students from, for example, Asia or European countries. Mm-hmm.
No, it's good to know.
Yeah,
one of the observations I've made, so I'm in my office, so I come in a few days a week, obviously, because I'm teaching in the hybrid sort of format. One of the things I've noticed going to campus is Emory's done a really good job with making sure the students are doing the best they can to be safe. I'll see students jogging around campus, freshmen, always wearing masks. So kudos to Emory, kudos for the students that are here. I know, Pablo, you have a couple of provocative lectures that you do around sort of behavior and sort of face masks in these times. And I wonder if you could sort of share that with us.
So a big part of my research agenda is thinking about behavior, and in political environments in particular, but there are other examples where sometimes we do something to be seen to be doing it, what we might call expressive behavior. So a lot of voting, for example, you're very unlikely to swing an election with a single vote. And so the what we call the instrumental, the effect of your vote is often very small, but there's an emotional or a psychological component to voting that's important. And it varies across a lot of things. But I think mask wearing is a good example because the truth is wearing a mask has very little effect on your own health, especially a non-N95 mask, a kind of a regular cloth mask. And so there's not a lot of personal reason to do it. There's a societal reason to do it. But even, one person adhering or not adhering to the mask rule doesn't make a big difference. And so I think it's an example of a behavior where the effect of that behavior in aggregate matters, just like voting, but for any individual doesn't. And so the motivation to do it is primarily expressive. And so that makes it very easy to politicize the behavior because there isn't a selfish reason to do it. There isn't even a pro-social reason for any individual to do it. And so the expressive component really matters. And so in the US, for reasons that are both obvious and baffling, it's become politicized. And so if you're not too worried about protecting yourself, and frankly, there's a very little self-protection, then why not use that expressive benefit, or why not get that expressive benefit? It's like trolling and, or the sort of people who put up offensive bumper stickers, lots and lots of things are like this, and not wearing a mask or wearing one of these obnoxious mesh masks that people wear is another way of putting an offensive bumper sticker in your car to quote unquote own the libs, as an example of that. And I'm not saying that, and I think what's important is that we recognize that is in some sense rational, right? If you've got these two things that motivate you, there's nothing wrong with getting enjoyment from pissing. Well, I mean, there may be something morally wrong with it, but it's not irrational to necessarily get enjoyment from pissing people off.
It's interesting. It's sort of the whole bumper sticker really came home to me in the sense that so what I did a number of months ago was I ordered a mask from Roots online. And when I received it, it was like, oh my gosh, it's got the Roots tag just on the outside. So now I have something that I can wear around,
Identifies
and
a Canadian.
so the Americans don't really know, they don't even notice it, right? But a Canadian, if they see you down here wearing something with the Roots tag on, it's like, oh, you know. And so it gives me a chance to sort of secretly bond with all these other Canadians that I might meet up in Home Depot or Lowe's. And so now I actually have 4 or 5 of them that I wear, and
That's
sort
a
of
great example.
exchanges as well. So Yanwen, some thoughts?
Oh, I think you better wear that or put the sticker on when you drive to Canadian, because I heard lots of identity recognition or kind of, you know, negative emotions towards people from the South.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I could certainly
But
see
I
that.
agree with, yeah. I
I
totally
think
agree with Pablo on,
Please go
sorry,
ahead.
go ahead.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with Pablo on the expressiveness, like kind of emotion, because back to the like a marketing perspective, in the old days, we were different brands trying to express your own identity, right? So nowadays, like it seems, brands, of course, you can still keep wearing, but the best, most powerful like self-expressionist is wearing a mask or not. So I guess it serves the same role. Mm-hmm.
And this actually brings a question to my mind, and we can actually draw parallels with other industries as well as we talk about it. So, do you think that because we have now proven the model of delivering e-lectures, foreign students that have to take a huge financial liabilities to actually fly all over the globe to come to Canada or US would now prefer to be stationed in their home countries at their homes and rather take those classes while still being enrolled. And that too with US because of such strict immigration policies. Where do you think that the student as the customer, their behavior is going to tend towards going forward from here? And where does that leave the education industry per se when it banks on a lot of foreign students to come in, even looking at it as an industry too?
Well, there's just a couple of observations. And so number one is that if you think about what's happening, for example, in Asia, is the local schools are getting options are getting much stronger. And so, you know, an analogy might be Europe. So even forgetting the whole, you know, pandemic thing, in Europe, students used to often come to America. You seldom see a critical mass of Europeans sort of studying in the US now. They've got great options that are a little bit more local. And we're certainly seeing that now in Asia, and that was sort of a trend. So I think even without the pandemic, you're going to find that once the local options become, you know, good, and there are some really good schools in a lot of these countries that I think you're going to find regardless that people will potentially, you know, some of them will want to stay home. Yeah, Yanwen, what do you think?
No, I totally agree, like a local option advantage. And the other thing I'm realizing is just from the education or school's perspective, we're actually facing, well, good thing and bad thing. The good thing is just in terms of the enrollment number, surprisingly, UBC started this year, we see a very like stable enrollment as compared to the last few years. That was very surprising to our dean and everybody else. But on the other side, we're also facing lots of competition because what I know is like Harvard, MIT, Stanford, Wharton, they're all launching relatively short-term certificate online programs. So it's like providing way more choice opportunities for students, such that the geographic potential disadvantage in the old days is going to disappear and make all the competition more equal and at a different landscape. Mm-hmm.
You know, when I think about the quote unquote treatment effect of coming to Emory, is particularly for the undergrads, you know, I think classroom education is a large part of it. But I think that there is a bundle of things that matter, right? And those sort of social experiences, particularly for an undergraduate degree, you know, part of it is actually just consumption. You know, like we think of it as an investment, but and it's expensive consumption, but there's something kind of there's something. It's an important point in people's lives, and so there's something to be said for the consumption benefit or education for itself versus the long-term investment. And And then there are the kind of the peer effects and social learnings. And so I think this is an opportunity for us to maybe get a sense of how much these matter, you know, because we're really shutting down two of those channels. I think the peer effects, at least temporarily, are going to be arrested. You know, I came to the United States for undergrad, and one thing I think that's different about the American system, and it's particularly true for Emory, is this sort of liberal arts approach, where there's, you know, you're not in a particular faculty, you're really taking a diverse set of classes. And I don't know if there's as much competition for that sort of broad experience, where essentially all the elite American schools, you're not coming and doing like what you would do at, for example, McGill, which a lot of my friends went to, where they would take, you know, 2/3 of their class in one subject. It's a much more diverse experience, and the other systems just aren't set up to address that. Even Europe, it's much more kind of intensive training in one subject. So that's a comparative advantage, at least of the U.S. system.
Good observation. Let's sort of maybe switch gears. And Pablo, I heard you in your introductory comments talking about sort of buying bicycles. And so maybe we could talk a little bit about sort of your thoughts on sort of the retail sector. You know, there's clearly some winners and losers, and on your observations.
Yeah. So, you know, I think, you know, it's an opportunity for people to explore and change behaviors. And one thing, you know, in our immediate behavior, what I've noticed is that we've shifted a ton of things online. You know, like a lot of yuppies, we'd have our buy this there and that there kind of behavior. And we've really got it down to one big online load. And then we've substituted certain behaviors that you can't trust online. So groceries, like things like produce and meat. And so for us, it seems interesting that there's an odd winner is the local grocery store. And I think an open question is, are these kind of, is this sort of behavioral change that we've had, are we going to develop a new habit and change our behavior? We're going to see that happen a lot. I think in Canada, you know, one thing that's very different about the Canadian retail sector, in particular for groceries, which I think a lot about, partly because I have friends in the industry, is you know, something like Loblaws with President's Choice as a brand. You know, I think the store brands in Canada have a lot more cachet or have higher quality. And when you shop online, I think it removes the kind of the brand decision a little bit more. Amazon's exploited this by creating like tons and tons of fake house brands, essentially. Like especially in clothing on Amazon, you know, they've created a bunch of essentially shadow brands, but also for household things, they've been rolling them out because online behavior, like with the airline industry, I think is people start to focus on the sort by price. And so that creates an opportunity for store brands as well, which is something else I've thought about.
Yeah, good observation. It's funny, you know, when I sort of think of kind of the retail sector, the one thing that, you know, I just love to shop. Also, let me tell you that. So I you know, as soon as I could go back into stores, I sort of a little bit reluctant, but I've gone sort of occasionally. But the one thing that sort of jumps out at me is I see obviously these sort of winners and losers in big sectors, and I don't think people realize how well the winners are really doing, because I think the winners have a lot of stockouts. So down here in the United States, for example, Dick's Sporting Goods, you can't get any exercise equipment for months. Lowe's and Home Depot. I was thinking about buying a barbecue last weekend. It was like a 3-week or 4-week order backlog for a barbecue. And so imagine what their sales would be had they actually had, you know, a full set of sort of product in store. So I think, you know, people are going, oh my gosh, Lowe's and Home Depot are making, you know, a lot of money. Imagine what they would have made had they, you know, been prepared for these conditions. Yanwen, some observation about retailing?
No, I think like first, I think it puts a pressure on lots of retailers in terms of their supply chain management and stock out management, right? Because we've been talking about like automation and machine learning for all the time, but let's face the reality. Not all the retailers or not all the traditional stores are digitalizing, right? So this is definitely putting a pressure, and that's why you see a growing like a gap between the strong player versus the lowers. Mm-hmm. The second thing I think is the tough thing is I've been receiving lots of promotions as a consumer. But the challenge like you face is you want consumers to buy, right? But you are cutting the prices. Of course, that's a hurt on your bottom line. But on the other side, consumers are also facing the financial challenges. And as you also see the volatility on the stock market. So that dilemma, like we've seen that at depression, we've seen that at lower times or bubble time. But this pandemic, the difference is nobody knows when this is going to end. And nobody knows how long those promotions can go on and how much revenues or profit a big player could cut. So I think I'm a little bit worried on that end. Except then promotions, if there's any effective business strategies a company can use to lure in their customers.
Yeah, that's an interesting observation, that idea of sort of the end. The end seems to be a moving target. You know, at one time we thought it would be midsummer, and then it was going to be September 1st, and then January 1st, and you know, now companies are saying, you know, come back in sort of mid-July, and sort of be interesting to see how that plays out. You know, Pablo, you and I offline, I'm going to cycle back to the whole face mask thing. One of the things, observations you made is that, you know, what happens when there's a vaccine? And you know, how might that affect sort of behavior?
You know, there's a great paper by a woman by the name of Courtney Ward, who's a University of Toronto PhD, who's a professor at Dalhousie, and I'm teaching this paper in all my classes now. And what she does is she exploits the change in Ontario's flu vaccine policy around 2000. So what Ontario did is it dramatically increased the coverage of who's going to get paid or who is going to get reimbursed for flu vaccine and the recommendations. It used to be basically mostly 65 and older or very young children. And so they do this change, and there's not much of a change in 65-year-old vaccine rates because they were already pretty high, but there was a massive increase in vaccines for people between the ages of 2 and 65. And the cool thing that she notes is that the big beneficiary of this were people 65 and older because of the herd immunity that was created by getting the general population to vaccinate a lot more. And the paper is very clever. It does sort of comparisons across time and when the vaccine is particularly effective. So it's statistically very interesting. But you know, the back of the envelope calculations that she does just on the savings in healthcare and lost worker productivity days, not to mention, you know, the world we're in now, not to mention the human suffering, right? None of those are part of it. It's such an obvious, like the returns are so high that it's very plausible that paying people $1,000 to get vaccinated is a no-brainer. Like for you know, just in terms of GDP growth alone, it'd just be it's almost an unholy investment. You know, like if your broker brought you the returns that this would have, you'd walk out and say you're lying, right? But or you'd say Bernie Madoff. But I really do think this might be one of the greatest investments we can make in society, would be to pay people to get vaccinated. This would immediately undo that expressive component too, right? So one way to get rid of is you say, okay, how much do you want to own the libs, or how much would you like $1,000? You know, and we could put a price on it.
And Pablo, how do you think that transition's going to go? You know, because you know, maybe one week you get the vaccine and I'm in line, I'm a B, maybe we're going in reverse alphabetical order, and it's a month before I can get mine.
Right. Yeah, I'll be giving you the stink eye, right? You won't be wearing your mask, and I'll be doing this sort of silent Canadian judging, right? Where you've done the worst thing in the world, which is be impolite, but I'm too polite to say anything, right? But I'll be scouring that you violated it. And then the problem is that could undo the norm, right? If we start seeing people who are vaccinated, so in some sense, if I got vaccinated, I would still wear a mask in public, partly because I don't want to be silently judged, but also because I want to keep that norm going, you know? So I think there would be a period of time where you're kind of a belts and suspenders type world.
And on the retail part, interestingly, Professor Pablo, on the mask and the vaccination stuff as well, I just want to share my own personal observation that just happened like a couple of weeks back, and share your thoughts on how it will evolve. As part of my own profession, I focus a lot on customer experience as well. And in coming times, a key element to drive experience is going to be confidence, right? Now, I went for jeans shopping a couple of weeks back, and I just checked on, the clearance and the sales section as well as to if they have got anything there. And I found a couple of items that were returned. And immediately, however good the jeans was, immediately I made up my mind that I'm not going to buy that. And I am not sure if me as a customer, as a consumer, my confidence, how is it going to get changed in coming times, and I'll be able to buy something that somebody has returned that I don't know was even wearing a mask or got vaccinated. And what impact is it going to have on the retail players on maintaining their inventory of returned items or their policy changes towards returns?
Yeah, I think this, I don't know the exact answer to that, but I do think there's been a cost to some of some of the security theory. Emory's even doing this a little bit. Everyone's doing this. It's just like we emphasize wiping down surfaces and nightly deep cleanings and stuff like that. The evidence on sort of that, touch overnight kind of contact and like how contagious like a pair of used jeans might be, I think pretty minimal seems to be the evidence. And there's kind of these scare things. So I think it's a cost of security theater, right? Or of hygiene theater, which is, it makes this salient to people and it makes it salient and it makes people worried about what I would call probably second or third order risks. For sure, the coronavirus is something we should be worried about. And for sure, we should be worried about airborne transmission. How worried should we be about touching something that someone touched? To me, it's somewhat reminiscent a little bit of the AIDS crisis, which is and actually, this is another weird Canadian thing. I remember very vividly an episode of Degrassi Junior High, which was filmed around the corner from me, where one of the characters was HIV positive, and the whole episode was about not getting people worried about catching AIDS from a toilet seat, which was the fear of the 80s. And I think we've kind of created a similar fear around touching things that people had. I was washing my groceries, like I was subject to it too. And I don't know what the solution is to getting that better. A problem that a retailer that starts to adopt that and says, we're going to throw away everything, that just contributes to that fear, because of, well, why are they doing it if it doesn't matter?
So Yanwen, are you familiar with Degrassi Junior High?
No, not necessarily.
No, nor am I. So I'm too old and you're too young. And so Pablo, you're right on the right.
Drake was
right
on the next
demographic.
version. So if you know Drake, you know Degrassi indirectly. So.
All right, Yanwen, let's sort of switch gears. Maybe another industry. Maybe we think a little bit about hospitality. That's obviously a big industry in UBC. First of all, background. Are restaurants open? Are they? Is it still takeout only? Are they allowed to have outdoor seating? What are some of the what's happening out in Vancouver?
This was actually a good time because I think before yesterday, not everything was open, but the bars, restaurants were allowed to open. But I think we've started to see the numbers surge again. So Dr. Bonnie Henry, the equivalent of Dr. Fossey, so just announced everything rolling back. So there's no more bars and restaurant can only open till 5 or 10 p.m. Mm-hmm.
Is there any sort of unique law? Is there any sort of unique laws that have sort of materialized? So, for example, here in Atlanta, they were relaxing sort of the alcohol to go laws. They were allowing restaurants to, in some ways, take over the street fronts and things like that. Is that happening out in Vancouver?
Mm-hmm. I think you can buy alcohol from online, which I don't believe was the case before. And the other thing, the hygiene concern, I think it's particularly salient for hospitality, like hotels, restaurants, as well as airline industries. So what I predict is for a very long time, those industries have tried their best to educate consumers of their hygiene process. Because I've taken a flight from Vancouver to Seattle, right, across the border. And ever since then, or ever since I started looking for flights on Google, I've started receiving emails from Delta, Delta CEOs announcement to all of their potential customers. What are the steps Delta is doing to sanitize the whole airplane before boarding and to sanitize everything, your luggage? So I started to receive those emails almost once every week. So I think those kinds of efforts are very necessary and very important, because why we are fear, or why do we get those anxiety? Because we don't know. Like, we don't know how companies are dealing with those procedures. So you have to educate them, trying to lower their anxiety and to ensure, like, I've even seen they're collaborating of academia from Emory and Georgia Tech, like, to deliver and to measure the air qualities on their plane. So I think all the brands in those industries probably have a long way to go to educate their consumers what they did to ensure the security.
And do you think those will last long term? Like,
I think it will last long term until the new norm no longer is the norm, or we are back to the old good days.
It's funny. I flew up to Detroit to go into Canada for Canada Day, so it was around July 1st, and I too had the same experience with Delta. I was amazed at how the efforts they were taking to for cleaning on the plane. But the weak link was Atlanta Airport. It was, oh my gosh, so that just goes to show you, the whole sort of consumer journey. Delta's doing the best they can, and then the other partner in the journey really isn't up to the same. At least my experience wasn't up to the same standards, at least at the time. Pablo, thoughts on sort of hospitality industry, restaurant industry?
yeah, so I think what's interesting to me is that there's going to be some law changes. So those are kind of permanent changes. As we discussed, like the liquor, changes. Those are high. That's the profit margin for a lot of hospitality in the U.S. it's notoriously hard. Well, in Ontario too with the LCBO, but it's notoriously hard to innovate in liquor because the distributor networks are so politically strong in each state. And so this is a kind of an unprecedented regulatory opportunity. The number of near billionaires that are state monopolists in liquor distribution is pretty high. A lot of sports franchises are owned by them. And so I think this is a really interesting opportunity because the laws are changing. And we talked about like restaurants taking over part of the street. Does that become a new norm? Does that become a new seasonal norm? And of course, there's going to be massive bankruptcies in the restaurant industry. And so I think we're going to get the winners, or the ones that survive, maybe in a really good opportunity. And so we might see the mix of restaurants. Those that have been easily able to go to takeout have done really well. Especially on the high end, it's hard. So we've tried to support kind of we're moderate foodies, and we've tried to support some of the restaurants we really like. Ramen doesn't do well in takeout. Bao does. There's certain foods that do better as takeout than others. And for us, at least, I imagine that the very highest end restaurants have suffered more than others, and so that the mix will change over the next 6 months.
And in the restaurant industry, importantly, I just wanted to pick your thoughts on, do you think that the consumer confidence is more going to lean on some established brands or chains in having confidence that these guys will take care of sanitizing the space versus their attitude towards one-off or mom and pop kind of restaurants and, ice cream joints and all those smaller places that they open? What do you think, like, how will I be confident that a small restaurant might also be taking enough steps to maintaining the hygiene or the sanitization?
My own sort of observation and behavior is very similar to Pablo's, that I'm trying to sort of support the local small businesses as best I can, as are my neighbors. Misbehavior sort of travels pretty quickly up and down my street, and so I think that's sort of the self-policing mechanism for a lot of these small businesses. The national chains, obviously, they're doing sort of the best they can. I think in some cases that the science has evolved relatively quickly, and can they react to that in the short term? I don't know. One of the observations, it's funny, that one of my kids made was that, hey, Dad, McDonald's, you can't use the fountains yet, but all the other small restaurants around, you can fill your own cup. And I don't know the exact story behind that, but I remember when they were first sort of trying to figure out sort of recommendations, one of the things the CDC initially said was close down all the fountains. And then they backtracked on that, sort of relatively quickly. But I imagine, and again, I don't know the exact details, I can imagine a situation where the McDonald's corporate said, we got to close down all the fountains, and that hasn't come back yet. So I think, the advantage to the corporate chains is, maybe on some dimensions, but maybe not necessarily on others. Yanwen, are you helping out the local economy?
I did my best, but frankly, I think ultimately it's a trade-off between supporting the local community and trying to make sure you and your family stay safe, right? So I think everybody's trying their best to support local community. But if the small, stores cannot meet your hygiene standards, I don't see this supporting to go a long way. Because ultimately, if you think of those Maslow needs, the very basic needs is to make sure safety is the first, right? So once they can reach the safety expectation, then I will see more and more people willing to support the business. Mm-hmm.
Pablo, one of the questions that came in on the Q&A was, is this the end of the expensive celebrity chef?
I think it's the end of the having, the outlet in Vegas, the outlet in New York, the outlet in Toronto. I think they may be celebrities, but they're going to go back to the local model a bit more. Yeah. As we think about this, I spent a lot of time in Chicago, and Alinea is a kind of a famous restaurant there that didn't expand. They only ever kept basically one or maybe two locations, depending how, and they've actually weathered it quite well because the celebrity chef had developed the whole take-home market. I think the guys like Colicchio or all these guys who have like 20 restaurants around the country, I think that's much harder for a couple of reasons. Because one is you really have to trust your local people to be doing the right thing. This is a problem for all the chains. Is like Applebee's. I've got to trust that the Applebee's employee making whatever is going to be really adherent with the mask. I personally trust the local restaurant with the smaller restaurant with a well-paid staff, where they're kind of a quote unquote family, to do a better job. So I think that the tight connection between ownership and employees right now, to me, creates a bit more confidence actually than worrying about employees.
It's interesting, so, and I don't know if the Bowman family is an outlier, but I swear my wife watches at least 3 hours a day of cooking shows. And so, I know it's the celebrity chef, but, but somebody's a celebrity somewhere, whether or not they're winning the cake bake off or whatever the case may be. Mm-hmm. Cher, do we have any other questions coming in?
Yeah, there's another question we got, Professor, and that's basically about summarizing what we talked about, the retail, about hospitality. It appears that educating the customer on how or what steps they're taking to maintain the hygiene or sanitize the place is going to be very important and crucial. Do you also send some kind of a policy change towards there for all these services provider or goods provider to make it out publicly, there's things that they're taking in, the steps they're taking to maintain the hygiene or the sanitization of the place, even when the times become normal and COVID is all gone?
Yeah, I think that cycles back to Yanwen's point, and maybe we can go to her in a second. Your example with Delta is obviously things that they're doing right now are sort of driven by COVID, but post-COVID, are they just basically becoming good business practices? And I think, as Yanwen observed, yes. I expect now a certain level of resources allocated towards sort of safety and cleanliness. Yanwen?
I totally agree. I think this is a challenging time, but if the strong players were able to find a way to implement all of those hygiene routines in a low-cost fashion, this will create a long-term competitive advantage between Delta, United Airlines, and American Airlines. And in fact, I think there is already some discrepancies between the three big players, because Delta is the only one initially that said or announced they're going to maintain the middle rule, like a vacant policy, up to the end of next year. Up to the end of this year. And I think American Airlines then followed, but United Airlines, I don't think is still implementing the middle seat empty policy. Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. And I had one question that I personally had, and this circling back to the first topic of discussion, that was basically delivering lectures online through the video conferences. So my question is to actually all three of you. To understand student behavior, have you noticed any shifts or changes, or do you expect any shifts and changes in distraction level of the students, or their attention span, or their collaborative or kind of instance when they are attending lecture virtually? Like, what shift have you seen in their behavior towards it?
So Pablo, you can speak for the college. I'll speak certainly for business school. We've gotten a certain amount of training on that. And a lot of the training is don't sort of get complacent with the short term. So it may seem to be going fine for students right now, but if they've been cooped up for a while and it starts to feel a little lonely and sort of things like that. And so we've been coached to try and, try to identify, for lack of a word, identify situations, be a little bit more accessible. So for example, I was someone that never scheduled sort of formal office hours. I always just said, come by, I'm in most days, nonchalant. Now I purposely schedule office hours. I've been reaching out to sort of student teams on projects just so we can have, I know they're going to do fine on the project, but I want to make sure that we have a chance to have that, sort of 20-minute dialogue one-on-one on Zoom so that they feel comfortable in a connection with me and a connection with Emory. Pablo?
Yeah, I've noticed attendance has actually been better than normal, so I teach a mandatory class. So, sometimes I would get some melt and attendance has actually been really good. And I'm doing this very similar things. The staying around part, I think is an opportunity for a certain type of student who's lonely, who has the personality that wants to engage. I've had a couple students who I can tell they just want someone to talk to. Those are the students I'm most worried about. I think they're this kind of the students who are stuck at home, who are being adherent, and and there's a some segment of them. A surprising number of students are here or in Atlanta, but in the rented apartments, and I think they're getting a little bit more social experience because they have roommates at least. So I don't worry quite as much about them. But the enthusiasm's been there, and partly that's because the class is frankly way more engaging than it used to be, because I'm constantly asking them questions and throwing polls at them and stuff like that. And some jokey things. I think I've added a bit more humor, partly because I'm not as concerned about getting through the material, right? Because there's a separate, element to that, because they can watch the videos.
Mm-hmm. Okay, for me, my prediction is, I think education is about two components. One is the experience, and the other is the academic lecture component. So for the experience, of course, it's, it's getting a little bit hard. But on the academic lecture part, my prediction is this online education experience is going to completely shaking up the whole education landscape, which means very similar to the retailer business. The strong player is getting more and more, powerful, or getting more and more attention. For example, if you're a star lecturer, right? You can teach to 10 students. You can also teach to 1,000 students. There's no limit. So my prediction is both lecturers or students, students will have the freedom to choose the best lecture or the best classes to go to. But then it also poses a challenge for the lecturer. They have to improve. So otherwise, the discrepancy is going to be like the products on Amazon. The Amazon choice get all the volume sales, and the rest is going to be, forced to quit the market. Mm-hmm.
All right, so I think I'm just looking at the time, and I think we're almost done. I'm going to sort of close with the closing statement that I always make at the end of every semester, and it goes something like this. It's if you think that I can kind of help you, or I could suggest a reference, you want to bounce an idea off me or something like that, absolutely send me an email, reach out. I'll do the best I can. And in return, I ask one thing. And what I ask is that if you get yourself into an opportunity where you have a line that you're hiring against, I'm not saying you need to hire an Emory student, but all I'm asking is that you just give them a look. I think our students are absolutely phenomenal in all our programs, BBA, MBA, and our new MSBA program. We had a question online a little bit earlier about, hey, can I take a peek at some of the lectures that Emory are doing these days? If you go into Google or go into YouTube and you type in Emory undergrad YouTube channel, there's a whole bunch of mock classes that I did one for the business school over the summer. And I know there was a bunch of other faculty that did them too, if you want to see some of the things that were topics that we're working on today. So let me thank Pablo. Let me thank Yanwen. I'll do a double clap as best I can. And then I'm going to turn it back over to Katie. And what I'm going to ask Katie to do is, you know, in these things, I hope you'll sort of help us to keep the momentum going and help students understand of how that they can you know, keep getting involved like they have done tonight. So Katie, turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Doug. I want to thank everyone again for your patience as we worked through technology in this new during pandemic and what will be post-pandemic situations that we find ourselves in. And thank you so much for all attending this evening. Definitely appreciate the extra time, although my dog is whining in the background and wants my attention. So I think that is definitely our sign that the evening has come to a close. I want to just do another quick shout out. Thank you to Doug, Pablo, Yanwen, and most of all to Shakar, my wonderful partner in crime up in Canada, volunteer leader, co-leader for the Canada Network. This was Shakar's brainchild, and I know we'll be doing more programming like this specifically for Canada. You probably hear my puppy in the background, my apologies. And I do want to do one quick shout out for our next program as part of the Office of International Alumni and Constituent Engagement, and that is going to focus on Korea. It's going to be in collaboration with the Hala Institute for Global Research, which is part of the Global Strategy and Initiatives Office under the Vice Provost for Global Strategy and Initiatives, Philip Wainwright, and that will take place on Thursday, October the 15th. And you can find more information about that on the Emory International Programs page. And that will be sent to you via link when we send the recording out as a thank you for attending this evening. So again, thank you to everyone. Have a wonderful evening and continue to stay safe and well.